So I often find that the unspoken issues that go along with being a busy working dad are the money issues. We think there are 4 lives that make up dad life, and that is your work life, it's your family and home life, it's your sense of self, and the money life. But too often I don't see people talking about the money, our relationship to it, how we can manage it. What can we do with it? Why aren't we taught about it in school and in education? So I wanted to do something about that, and through my networks, I bumped into our guest today, who specifically helps parents plan and manage their financial futures, their attitudes to money, their relationship to money, and so on. So I thought, what better guest to have to speak about money than Ed Fraser. Ed, hello, how are you? Give us a little introduction about who you are, and what do you do, and how do you help us busy working dads and parents?
Morning, Rob. Thank you for having me. Yeah, frosty start this morning, doing not too bad. So yeah, what I do specifically is I help working parents with their personal finances. So the idea is really to allow them a journey towards kind of financial freedom, and that can take kind of different paths. And specifically, it's parents who are usually kind of between the age of kind of 30 to 45, and I think that might fall into we're generation Y, I think it is, or
there's a letter in there somewhere,
something in there. And yeah, so it's a combination of coaching and a coaching approach, but at the same time a bit of kind of education along the way to kind of help people feel more confident with their own finances, because it is a topic that people are not always comfortable about talking to.
Absolutely, and my I guess journey into education around money has been very much self-taught. I mean, why is it that you do what you do, Ed? What's led you down this path of financial coaching?
I think if you'd met me in my 20s, so a little while ago, so I'm 38, and my 20s, I had a job and it paid me, and it kind of, I was living in London, but and it was fine. It paid the rent, paid for kind of my life. I had no idea about the general other stuff, like, should I be saving? Should I be thinking about pensions? What are investments? What is budgeting? I definitely didn't feel like I was struggling, although I suppose if I look back now about kind of maybe when I was borrowing money, actually you might class that as kind of, it was a bit of a struggle there. And I've kind of got to a point now where I feel confident and comfortable. I know what I'm doing with my finances, and I want to be able to help those people who are in the same situation. That I grew up in an environment where money wasn't talked about, like many families. And so once I'd left school didn't teach me much about personal finances or kind of money. I just felt that I was, I don't know, what's the word, ignorant, naive to that world. And I think it's so important that you start engaging with that kind of relationship with money early to put you in the best position. And so I want to do a service to people, kind of give them a service where they can kind of start that journey early and feel confident with their money.
And you mentioned a couple of bits there, and I guess you don't know what you don't know. And when you're young, I grew up in a household where there wasn't money around. My parents were great, don't get me wrong, but we weren't brought up in a flush family or anything. But I don't think that necessarily guides the relationship to money, because I know people that were brought up in a moneyed household, if you like, and they get it and they spend it, and they get it and they spend it. They have no control or structure or plan. And do you think, Ed, that goes back to school? Do you think we should almost have some sort of real life financial education, not algebraic formulas or investments, but a real life credit and finance education in school? Do you think that there's room for that somewhere?
There is, technically, it is on the national curriculum. And I've spoken to a few of my kind of former colleagues. In the past life, I was a teacher, and but it's kind of brought under the umbrella of either kind of PSHE or maybe kind of tutor time. But it's not I would argue it doesn't have a great emphasis. I don't think I've met anybody who's actually said I had a great education of personal finances once they've left school. And it might be down to the fact that students find it, I don't know, they're not taking it seriously at that time, or it's difficult for the school to kind of teach the students when it's the same teacher. But maybe an external kind of party can come in, like provider, and be able to be those kind of people who are going to come in and educate the students on it. But you're right there about teaching students. I think the fundamentals, tracking of your spending, if they're not understanding that, how to save properly, when you get into the real world, what is a pension, what is a mortgage, what is insurance, why are all of these important, and how to understand them all. Otherwise, a lot of people tend to kind of coast until they really need to engage with it, and it might be quite far down the line.
And then it can be potentially too late. I mean, growing up as a man before I had kids, I didn't really have any structures in place or anything. I mentioned in the introduction, my sort of money education has been money structure has been very self-taught. I'm still exploring my relationship to money, what it means to me, how much of it I want, what it's going to enable me to do. For the parents and men and dads that you speak to, what do you see their relationship to money being like?
It's a funny one. Once people become a parent, I think the perspectives change, the priorities change. Before children, your income was for you and maybe you and your partner. And then suddenly, actually, there's some little ones that you actually have to kind of make sure there's enough for them as well. And I think that when I speak to parents, it is a case of going, right, do we have enough? Like, I suppose what a couple of good examples would be expectant parents is an interesting one. When I speak to people who say, okay, we're expecting to have children in a year, we've got plans for a year or a couple of years' time, or even kind of women who are pregnant and they have a chat with me about finances, and they say, right, okay, what do we do? How much do we need? Like, what do we get paid? How do we plan this out? Because I'm clearly not going to be working for a period of time, and there is an element of them wanting to plan ahead, which is really crucial, I always find. Then there is the stark realization of how much childcare costs. And when I kind of tell them kind of how much I'm paying for my two boys to go to nursery, they're kind of shocked by that if they weren't aware of it. If you're in London, that's even more expensive. And then I kind of sit there and go, well, where's that money going to come from? I ask them that, or they start asking those questions. And I think I'd say managing your own household finances definitely becomes more of a priority at the point when children arrive. I've noticed, because you're not as so, I suppose, focused on what you're doing with your own money for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned childcare. It's eye-watering, isn't it? It's we can't change the systems by any means, and we're not going to try and do that in the time we got here. But it's crazy, isn't it, that it's almost better not working than it is to work and pay for childcare. It's absolutely staggering.
Yeah, I think kind of from that perspective, when I sit here and go, and I tell you one thing that is gold dust. If you've got it, it is family help. If you're in a position where you've got family help, that is it can really put you in a much better position financially and physically and emotionally, all of them. And but I did the numbers and said, well, if I sent both my boys full-time, they're not full-time. I do a bit of part-time work. Grandparents do some help as well. But if I did do that, it would be close to the equivalent of my own salary, take-home pay per month. And this is where I sit there and I read about it and hear about it from so many, especially women, who sit there and go, well, why am I going back to work if my childcare is going to cost me more than my income? And it's a massive societal issue that it's excluding many people, specifically women, from rejoining the market. And there's a fundamental issue that has to be addressed. And certainly we can have our opinions. We have to leave it to governments to sort out.
Yeah, there's certain things we can't control, Ed, I think.
No,
Yeah.
I've sat there and I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, are you aware that if you're planning to have these two children, if you have them really close together, there will be a time when they're both in nursery, if you're planning that, and you're not getting access to any government support, especially when they're 2 years old, so before 30 hours or 15 hours for free, and you're going to be really financially hit at that point. And I think just the realization of seeing the timings for children, but also it's such an archaic system that when, like, you know, for example, the 30 hours for free kicks in, depending on when your child is born in the year, means that you might actually not access that until months and months and months later, which people just are not aware of until, you know, you've had your child and you sit and go, well, I can't change their date of birth.
Yeah. And this is the thing, isn't it? I think, again, you don't know what you don't know. And it's that awareness thing of the 30 hours free childcare doesn't kick in until a certain date, dependent on their birth, never mind a school year. We had that with one of ours, and it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with that then? Now we have to fund this, or one of us doesn't have to work to stay home. So how do we juggle this? And it's questions like this that bring, I guess, the issue of money into real life and into sharp focus. And if we don't have those conversations earlier, it hits us in the face, doesn't it?
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. There is having the conversations. Talking about money is not, for most people, an easy thing to do. I found it incredibly hard growing up, and my wife grew up in a family where they talked about money all the time, so she was very confident with it. I'll tell you a small story where we both worked. When we both opened up our first bank account, walked into Santander in Streatham High Street in London, and I think at that point when the bank manager was going, right, okay, can you walk me through your expenses? I was in my early 20s, I think, at that time. And he said, how much you spend on this? Don't know. How much you spend on this? Don't know. And literally it was don't know, because I wasn't tracking it, and it was really embarrassing. I felt really awkward. All I wanted to do was run out the door. My wife knew everything. Well, it was my girlfriend at the time. And it just made me realize that actually we hadn't talked about this before. And it is not easy. I'd probably avoided those conversations a lot. And yes, it is for people. I have some clients who find conversations with me not easy when they talk about finances. Slightly easy when it's more of a neutral party, but talking about money is the best thing you can do, and the best thing you can start with, I would say, for anybody, and especially couples, especially if you're going to have big kind of plans down the road.
Okay, so a couple of things spring to mind from the back of what you just shared there. And I think the first question to follow up on that would be, do you think we shy away from talking about money because there's some uncomfortable truths in there that there isn't enough, so we ignore it almost? So the ignorance is bliss angle. I've lost my train of thought on the second question. So go on the first one, and there was a follow-up to that. But yeah, do you think there is that ignorance is bliss piece?
I don't know. Is it societal kind of just, it's, you know what, it's the phrase, I really don't like this phrase, but when people say it's rude to talk about money.
Yeah.
Why? Why is it rude? You go and say to somebody, how much do you earn? People suddenly get all awkward about it, or how much do you spend on this, or how much was that holiday? It's not, people don't find it easy. I don't know if there is some element of some people don't want to appear to be, I don't know, gloating, or some people don't want to appear to know that they earn a lot less than other people. I can't put my finger on it of where.
Well, there are social stigmas, aren't there? I can't say I only earn minimum wage because this usually this man earns 50 grand a year, 60 grand a year. I don't earn that. I'll feel like a failure. And I think there's almost a stigma or social standing based around how much you earn.
Oh, hugely. I'm still not fully comfortable. I'm open about that. There are some people that I'm quite happy to talk to about finances and what my income is and what my savings are. Funny one is though that I don't feel comfortable talking to my own immediate family, my siblings, about it, just because there is that history there that we didn't talk about it, and I'm not sure if I want to know how much they earn, or I want to share with them what I earn. So yeah, there is that kind of stigma there.
So there are learned habits, but it comes from your family units, not an educational system potentially.
I think so much of how we're all wired is just what's happening in the household, what you see, what you hear, especially in your early years, is so formative. So yeah, definitely in the household, in school, I don't know. Depending on where you go to school. If you go to school where there is is maybe a private school and there's quite a lot of wealth kind of in families, there maybe there is a bit of comparing kind of with each other, or what you see.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses.
That kind of thing there.
Yeah, exactly. And we seem to think, I guess at that young age, we see money as a thing to unlock everything else, don't we? When I was young, it's like, I want to be a millionaire. It's like, but now I'm older, I think, well, why? What does it enable me to do? It's almost like money was the goal for money's sake. Whereas now I have questions around, well, what do I need it for or want it for? What does it enable me to do? And do you see those parents, dads that you're working with, do they have financial goals? Do they know what they want money for? Or is it, I just want more?
Most people have some form of goal, and they might not realize it, or might not have had the opportunity to explore it. Whenever I talk to people about their finances, there's a lot of people who come and go, okay, I want to know how to save. Okay, great. Okay, run an exercise. This is how you can do the budgeting. This is how you're going to cut back, etc. Okay, and then you go, I want to invest. I want to kind of see if I can make my money work harder for itself, or I think I should put more into my mortgage, more into my pension. And I sit there and going, okay, well, these are all journeys. These are all route. I suppose I've got a colleague of mine who said these are all different forms of transport. They will get you from A to B. Some will be super flashy, some will be slow and steady, some will be fast. But where are you going? What's your destination? Why do you have these savings? Like, is it that as an emergency fund to make you feel comfortable? Is it for that house? A lot of time I speak to people, there is usually some form of house goal or next house goal. It's a vast majority of conversations around that. Then there is, when I talk to people about, well, they want to invest, and well, what's the purpose of that? And actually, when it comes to parents, there usually is along the lines of, actually, I want to be able to have some funds for my children when they are older, maybe help them out with their own property, maybe just give them some form of funds when they hit 18 or 21 or something like that. But it's what I do when I have a chat with people is really make sure that they are able to have the space to explore and think about what they actually need the money for. Because you're right there, it's all well and good building up a nice pot of money, but you can't take it with you. And the government will take 40% of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they'll get their mitts on it somewhere, won't they?
So yeah, and if it is, somebody says, oh, actually, I want to retire. Okay, well, how much do you need for that? That's a whole nother conversation, which is a tough one. But yeah, identifying goals is really important. And
yeah, and I think as well, I'd be interested in your experiences around this. You start seeing these gurus, and I hate the word gurus, by the way, it's a little bugbear of mine, but you see these gurus online, and they'll tell you how they 10x this, or they got rich overnight, or they drive this car, or they have this private jet, which they probably hired for a day. But they give this false pretense or this false image that you can get rich quick. And for me, one of the most important lessons I learned around sort of financial planning is it's actually quite boring. It's quite slow and it's quite boring. I mean, do you see the same thing? Is there a fast route to financial security, or is it quite a boring thing?
I'd argue that it doesn't have to be boring, because when I have a conversation with people, it is, yeah, money is some numbers on a page, but it's actually what is the life that this is going to support. That's where the exciting parts of the conversation need to be focused on. Going, right, let's say you're going to save £10,000. What's that for? Okay, it's for a house deposit. Okay, right. Okay, why do you want a house? Okay, well, I want a house because of this. And you get into deeper and deeper. And actually, some people say, oh, actually, it's freedom.
Yeah,
it's financial security, or it's the space for the children in the garden, or I want to be out in the countryside or in the city. It's and asking the right kind of questions really unlocks the emotional link to why they need that money, and then you know exactly where that conversation needs to be held. Like, right, we want to get you, this is where you are right now, and this is where we want to get you to. This is the kind of the vision, this is the dream that you really want. Why can't we, let's figure out how to get from A to B. And yes, that some people might go, well, that journey it might be boring, kind of adding up the numbers, doing those bank statements, etc. So actually focus on where you're heading towards, because that is the exciting part.
Yeah, and it's an interesting framing of it, isn't it? Don't almost look at the process, which can be quite repetitive and slower in that respect, whatever your time horizon is, I guess. But look at the outcome, because that's the bit that should, I guess, light people up, right?
Yeah, because you need buy-in. Once somebody is understood exactly why they want to actually save the money, and they're really bought into it, no pun intended, and you understand what their motivation is, then it's easier to actually put the processes in. Okay, I was like, well, actually, I'm going to go and ask you to just do 3 months of bank statement analysis. And if I'd said that before they realized why they needed to do it, they'd be like, oh, it's a pain, it's boring, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, if you do this and you're able to save £100 extra a month, that's going to get you that much by the end of the year, and that's going to get you there, and that is going to get you to closest to that goal, or you're going to hit that goal much quicker. And they're bought into that whole process then.
Yeah, and then they can, I guess, there's a sense of ownership and responsibility about it. And part of your role, I don't know your business well enough, is I guess to help people see that. Is to look, you can take ownership, responsibility to this. Don't just see money as a in and out transitory thing, but something that can actually create something that you want. And that makes it more exciting, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And I think for me as well, there's that element of, once you've got financial security, some people call it financial freedom, I guess, the level above that. That's probably where I aim for, because for me, it gives time. It gives time back. You don't have to work 60, 70 hours a week. You don't have to get busy, because you've got the time to actually be liberated to do what it is you want. And that, in the examples that you use there, that's the bit that lights me up. It's like, well, I can get time. Wow, I can spend time with my kids. I can show them what a good plan looks like, and a good route to freedom looks like. But again, I think there's elements of that these gurus make it sound easy, and it's not easy. If it was, everyone would do it. And I think they use words like passive income. Like it's like, come on, you still have to work for it, don't you? It just doesn't appear. And I think people can get really lulled into this sense of it's easy, and therefore if you don't do it, you're almost a failure. But there's a lot of pressures. Cost of living, the cost of having children. Everything seems to be going up week on week. What can we start to do, I guess, proactively, without just having the pressure on us to earn more, because we can't just go out and earn more? What structures can we put in place? What can we do proactively to start, even if it's the smallest levels, saving or planning for a better financial future in light of rising costs in our world?
Yeah, I think in the last year or so, conversations around actually, I don't have as much savings anymore. I'm using my savings, or everything is going up, and or I'm not able to save anymore. And there's more struggles. And one thing I think is a really useful task for people to do is to, you do need to look at your numbers, I'm afraid. As much as some people might find that onerous and boring, you need to know where your number stands, whether that's on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis. And to do that, you need to look at whether that's a joint kind of accounts or your own accounts, going, right, because at the end of the day, like, you've got your income. It'd be great if you managed to get a pay rise, but in all likelihood, people aren't getting regular pay rises. Yeah, right, that's your income for that month. Okay, well, what's your outgoings? And I say to people, okay, do you know what your outgoings are? And they go, yeah. I spend X amount on my rent, my mortgage, and my water cost this, my council tax this, and it's the variable stuff that people don't really know. So there's fixed and there's variable. The fixed, you can go on your bank statements, there'll be the direct debits and so on. There are some people who aren't aware of it. They just go, oh, I'm okay at the end of each month. I'm okay. Well, you still need to know kind of how much you're spending on X, Y, Z. And more recently, there's been pay rises. There's been increases in those areas. Energy is obviously the biggest one. And people need to be aware of how much it's going to go up in April, for example, how this is going to impact them, or what the increase in the council tax was last year or upcoming. Those are easier to pin down. It's the stuff that is the variable kind of spend that people sit and go, yeah, I don't know. If you do know, good for you. Like, it's such an important step, because the clue's in the name, it varies by month. That's why it's hard. So yeah, December is a bit of a bumper month because of Christmas. But right, how much are you spending on groceries per month, travel, entertainment, leisure, grabbing that coffee on the way to work, whatever it might be, shopping? And once you get a grasp of what that is, I always say, look, grab 3 months of bank statements, get your highlighter out, print them out. Don't do it on your phone, don't do it on your computer, because you can't engage with the numbers quite the same way. And actually put it down on paper or put it down in a spreadsheet, so you know how much you're spending on average over 3 months in those areas. And then once you know your numbers, then you've got much more power, because you might sit there and go, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. Or you might sit there and go, actually, I need to adjust these. And if you do want to adjust them, you can ask yourself 3 questions. The first one is there anything on there that you can do without completely, that you can cut out? Classic one is some form of subscription. Netflix has been a big one in the last year that people have turned away from. And you've got to bear in mind, these are going to be small wins. There's not going to be, it'd be amazing if there was a £250 kind of.
Yeah. Oh, I'm spending £1,000 a month or something.
It's going to be small wins. So what can you do without completely? Number 2, what could you do less of? So I'm not saying cut it out. So it might be those coffees that you love grabbing on the way to work, but it's costing you £4 every time you grab it. And then you admit to me that actually you grab a croissant as well. So that's £6 or something. You go, well, actually, clearly you like your coffee. So why don't you do this? Still do it. Don't cut it out, because you'd hate it, but do it less often. Okay. And the third one is, what could you do for less? So where could you do your food shop that maybe will cost you less? Or where could you buy the pet food or whatever it is, or I don't know what it is you're spending your money on, and find an alternative that's going to be less costly. And it is going to be small wins. And doing this exercise, you don't want to make it painful. If you do something that's going to be like cold turkey, cut out all this, guarantee you that you'll come back in a few months and go back to normal, because you didn't enjoy it. This is why these kind of, yo-yo diets people talk about. But this has got to be a sustainable approach. And if you do this I've had some people do it every month, and it's a bit of a task to look at your finances at the end of every month. And if you've got family, there's not much time to do this, but every few months is important, I would say. Talk about it openly with your partner, and talk about, right, if you're not happy, what are you going to cut down? Then review it after 3 months. see how far you've come, because you want to be able to see what the difference has been, and then basically look at what you are able to adjust going forward.
I think that's a very prudent, and again, it comes back to responsibility and being proactive about things, doesn't it? I'd be shocked if those listening to this couldn't run that exercise and quite easily save at least £1,000 a year. At least. The amount of business owners we speak to that, because they're not taught business numbers, therefore they don't look at household numbers, they don't have a clue. They're just busy. Like you mentioned, I'm busy enough. There's enough in bank to cover me this month. I'll be all right. It's not planning forwards, is it? Whereas this, when we see it black and white, we can actually take decisions based on what we can cut completely, do less of, or do differently.
There is one added element to this, which I find is really powerful, which is, why are you doing this? Because I've had some people sit there and go, I can do that, but I don't feel like I'm bought into the purpose of doing it. Okay, well, okay, let's say you do it and you figured out how to save X amount of pounds per month. Okay, right. Why do you need that? You know, well, I want to go on holiday. I want to buy my first house. Okay, well, actually, instead of it just being sat there at the end of every month in your current account or whatever, siphon that off, or actually say you're going to save this amount off and move it into a separate account. So it's actually ring fenced. At the end of the month or the start of the month, whenever it suits you, move that savings across somewhere else. You can actually see it, and it's separated from everything else. And you can start to see the fruits of your labor, and you can build that up. Otherwise, if it just sits with everything else, it's hard to see it, and also hard to know what's the point.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you can look at that coffee and cake that you mentioned, yeah, people might just look at it as an arbitrary, well, it's only £6. Yeah, but if you do that 3 times a week, that's £18 a week, and then that's £72 a month, and then that's almost £1,000 a year, right there, by cutting a cake and a coffee. It's doable, and it's there. And I think if we're just ignoring the fact that these small changes, it goes back to that longer term planning, doesn't it? And you mentioned about but why am I doing this? So what? We can save £1,000 a year.
Yeah,
that's not a small figure in 12 months' time. That pays for your Christmas.
Exactly.
You can invest it, like you say. I like the framework, and I think would you recommend quarterly? Like you say, people are busy doing it every month, might become a chore.
I think quarterly is useful. Longer than that, it doesn't really. You don't really engage; it just disappears.
Yeah.
And things change throughout the year. You might have a quarter where there's a few birthdays coming up. You go, right, actually, we need to factor that in, or there's Christmas at that point, or the summer, like when the kids are at home during the holidays. We need to factor all of these different things in. That's why actually that quarter was much more expensive. So I've had some people do it on a monthly basis because they're already quite used to, running spreadsheets and can do it quite quickly. Once you get going, I'd say, like, the first time you do it, probably set aside an hour to 2 hours to do this. Put the phone away, unless you're looking at it for your kind of
purpose of the task. Yeah.
There are apps that do it for free. There are some great apps out there, such as Emma or Money Dashboard, and they're free and they're linked to your bank accounts and credit cards. But I'd always argue, and I've had some clients who love using those, but I'm going to point out that you don't engage with the numbers quite the same way as you would if you printed the paper, the statements out, had it in front of you, and you actually had the highlighters out, and you're really looking at every single transaction. Whereas many banking apps will go, oh, we'll do the categorization for you, and we'll do this, we'll do that. And there's real benefits to that, but I don't think a person's going to engage with the numbers quite the same way.
Yeah, I mean that's one of my takeaways from what you've just been talking about. It's actually print them out, because I am a bit of a demon on this, and every quarter I'll look at our expenses, but it goes through an Excel sheet, because I'm a bit of an Excel geek. Whereas next time I'm going to print it out and literally do the highlighted example. I think it's a great shout. And also, just one thing I don't want listeners to miss. You mentioned about this becoming habitual, not like a crash diet. We're recording this in January when a lot of people are doing dry January.
Yeah.
I think if we try and, like you say, go cold turkey and remove it completely, we start to resent it. Whereas if it just does a bit less of something, we do things a bit differently, but it continues in our life, we barely even notice a difference. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it will become a bit of a discipline going forward. Hold yourself to account, definitely. Put it in your diary, going, this is the time when I'm absolutely going to be doing this. Don't put it off, but don't make it painful, because you won't want to do it again. I've had people who have said they've tried budgeting, and it's always interesting asking why did it not continue, and they say, and various reasons, but make it worthwhile. Make it make it some form of satisfying kind of habits. If you've ever read Atomic Habits, some great stuff in there about how to make kind of habits stick.
Yeah, I've heard the book. I've never read it, but I've heard a lot of people mention it, so I'll add that one.
Yeah, I'd say if I'm a slow reader and I like a podcast, so there is some great podcasts with James Clear as well. If you've got a good commute on you, or you have an hour to an hour and a half to sit down and listen to it. Otherwise, I spend months and months and months reading the same book.
Brilliant, Ed. As we sort of head to rounding up around this discussion about money, it'd be good to know some, outside of the plan you've just mentioned, which I think in itself is a fantastic to-do and takeaway. What do you think those busy working dads can start to do today or tomorrow to take a more controlled view of our money, to be happier with our relationship with money? What can we start to do to take that ownership, to avoid the head in the sand, ignorance is bliss, it's their fault mentality? What would you suggest we can start to do?
I think number one is set aside a time for a conversation with somebody about your finances, whether that's your partner, whether that's somebody else who you feel comfortable talking to about this. But it's not a conversation to have, just sat on the sofa in front of the TV for 5-10 minutes whilst the TV's on in the background, or you're on your phones. It does require some focused time to really engage with what you actually want with your money. And that's, I think, really an important step to start with, I would say. Outside of that, I think, is to, once you know what you think you want your money for, is to start to engage with your numbers. Start to go, right, do we know how much we spend a month on this, or how much do we actually have in savings, or are we, if you want to look further down the road, do we know what's in our pension pot? 95% of people I speak to do not know what's in their pension pot, because if you want to know what your future is going to hold, have a look at what's in your workplace pension pot, and there are some useful calculators out there that will do it for you. But it's get your numbers and have them down on paper or on a spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah, brilliant. And yeah, the pension one's interesting, isn't it? I'm 38 now, and I don't think I started a pension. Yeah, I work for myself, so I don't think I started a pension meaningfully until about 3 years ago, because I thought, well, I'll never reach retirement age anyway. They keep bumping it, they keep bumping it along. But I am trying, and there is something in there now. But my next step will be about how I can make that pension work and accelerate itself, and not just have it sat there as a pot of cash.
Yep.
Hopefully
Absolutely.
get bigger. Yeah. Good. So set time aside for that conversation with your partner, with your wife, with your significant other. Expectations, ambitions, what would you want money for? And then start to proactively lose the fear and start to engage with your numbers, start tracking that spend. I think there are a couple of great takeaways there, Ed.
Yeah, and I think if you and once you've had those, you've got your goals, you've got your numbers, then it's a case of getting a plan in place. How are you going to get there?
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that's the thing. We have to look at the foundation first, our state of play first, and then get that plan moving forward. I mean, that's it's great advice, Ed, and thank you so much for engaging with us about the topic of money. I think it's often an elephant in the room that we ignore. Ed, if people want to move forwards with a plan and get to know more about you and learn more about you and what you do for them, how can we find you and connect with you and engage with you? What's your website? Where are you on social media?
So if people want to find me, I'm usually hanging out on LinkedIn or on Instagram. So if you look on Instagram, it's Parent Money Coach is the name. You can look up Ed Fraser, the Parent Money Coach, and it's the same with LinkedIn. So Ed Fraser, Parent Money Coach.
Superb. Ed, keep up the good fight. Talking about money, it matters to us all, and I think the more important work you keep doing, the more it will normalise a conversation and make better awareness around the topic of money. Just like to say thank you so much for taking time with us today, Ed. It's been a really interesting chat. I've got stacks of notes to go and type up. And I hope those watching and listening will do the same as well. Ed Fraser, it's been a pleasure, sir. We'll see you soon, and enjoy the sunny day, which has come straight onto my screen, as you can probably tell. Ed, we'll see you again soon, buddy. Take care.
Cheers, Rob. Thank you so much.